But you see it as a possibility if he wants to spend $1 billion beating this guy, he could do it.
Absolutely. Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population, 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is.
Oh, I'll tell you what's disturbing. What's disturbing is that this is not an episode from Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Okay, what's disturbing is that this actually happened. If you permit me, I feel like I just have to do this. On behalf of every single citizen of the United States of America, I want to personally apologize to the entire world for our obviously broken educational system. I mean, how do you make this as if things couldn't possibly get worse for the ultra-liberal MSNBC? I mean, think about it. Is this the Marxist media version of 2 + 2 = 5? That's exactly what we're going to explore in this video and have a little fun in the process. We're going to take a look at the latest humiliation coming out of that ultra-left-wing network, that odious network, and how it reveals something far deeper about our media elite that they don't want us to know about. I think you're going to love this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here. Absolutely wonderful to be with you. As always, a super happy, awesome Friday to each and every one of you. If this is your first time here on this channel, we post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of some super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you here as a regular part of this channel, where each and every day we get to together celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. Now, before we get into the mathematical geniuses over on our mainstream media cohorts there, make sure to download your free gift, which we put together just for you. We're calling it our Fake News Antidote. It's a compilation of about 20 sites. I counted them actually personally myself. 20 sites that I go to for my news each day. You can download it completely free at the link down below in the pinned comments section. I think you're going to really enjoy that resource. And finally, before we begin, gang, I want you, and I'm serious about this, I want each and every one of you right now to click on the link below, head over to my special website for My Patriot Supply. With all the quarantines being enforced already, the quarantines that are guaranteed to come, and with all the pictures, those crazy pictures of the empty shelves that we're seeing as a result of this coronavirus insanity, it's such a relief to know that we have such good friends over at My Patriot Food Supply. Gang, they're simply the best. And there's frankly never been a better time to stock up on an emergency food supply. And no one makes it more ridiculously easy and affordable as My Patriot Supply. Their food kits last up to 25 years in storage. They include breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And gang, if you act now, you'll save 40% off on a 2-week emergency food kit when you go to my special website by simply clicking on the link below. It's a limited time offer, obviously, so don't wait for an emergency to happen before you respond to one. Take action now by clicking on the link below. Save 40% off with your 2-week emergency food kit today. I've got mine. Gang, make sure you get yours. Let's take care of each other in this process, all right? Let's dive in here. I think this is all rather self-explanatory from the video footage, but hey, here it goes. MSNBC's Brian Williams talking with a New York Times editor. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. It's like the beginning of a bad joke, right? Brian Williams and a New York Times editor walk into a bar. I mean, so they're there. Well, they are the joke. They're there discussing Bloomberg's embarrassingly pathetic campaign where he tried to actually buy the Democratic Party and the presidency. I mean, did the guy ever bother? Did he ever actually campaign anywhere? I think he just ran hundreds of millions of dollars of infomercials, as well as a bunch of pathetic memes, at least, well, try hard, but nevertheless. So they're discussing the train wreck of his campaign. And then this New York Times editor, I mean, doesn't that make you feel safe? This New York Times editor cites this tweet from a Washington Post writer. So now we have the MSNBC, we have New York Times, we have the Washington Post. They're all meeting together in this fellowship of the ring, as it were. And she repeats what the tweet asserted, which was that Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. The U.S. population is 327 million. So obviously that means that if Bloomberg had instead divided up that money he spent on ads equally among the American population, every single person would have gotten $1 million. Don't you love socialist logic? He spent $500 million. There are over 300 million people in the United States. So obviously, instead of wasting all that money on ads, he could have given each person in the United States $1 million. Now, if you think this through, this isn't just a matter of mathematical incompetence on the part from MSNBC and the New York Times and Washington Post. It's also a demonstration of astonishingly poor critical reading skills on the part of Brian Williams and this New York Times person. It shows really a shocking lack of reading comprehension. There were, after all, plenty of trolling comments under the tweet pointing out the obvious, that the writer for the Washington Post was slightly off, just, by, 6 zeros. Now, for whatever reason, Brian Williams and his guests, they didn't realize they were reading a glaring error in front of them, hence why they had no problem showing that tweet to the world, which ought to terrify anyone interested in the accurate mediation of information, which MSNBC and the New York Times claim to be doing, however, implausibly. But I think something much deeper is actually going on here in seriousness. It would be tempting to just dismiss this as a simple mathematical error. A really, really, really big mathematical error. But the fact that this error was first peddled by a writer for the Washington Post and then picked up by someone who sits on the editorial board of the New York Times and then discussed as credible on national television with a major MSNBC news anchor, something else far deeper seems to be going on here. Now, I'm sure most of you are all familiar with the dystopian novel 1984, right? A classic written by George Orwell. It was published back in 1949. And what it does is it details the authoritarian tactics of a totalitarian state. And this is where we get the whole term Big Brother. Big Brother's watching you, right? That's from 1984. I'm sure most of you know that. But it's required reading, actually, at the classical school that I teach at for our high schoolers. It's really, really cool that they get to interact with that book. They also read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, right? These are both British authors' critiques of modernity in general and the emerging globalist world order in particular and its entailed totalitarianism. But in 1984, again, I'm sure many of you are familiar, but there's the use of a mathematical equation that is obviously false, but it's used as a creed, as a confession of faith in Big Brother, in this totalitarian system. And that's, of course, the public confession 2 + 2 = 5. So one was expected to affirm such a mathematical absurdity in order to demonstrate that one's loyalty to the state's perception of reality overruled one's loyalty to his or her own perception of reality. The reality as defined by the collective, which was substantiated in the totalitarian state, that's the real reality, as it were, not my own personal perception of it. And the whole 2 + 2 = 5 meme, it has an interesting history to it, and its use in 1984 seems to have derived from Orwell's familiarity with both Soviet and Nazi propaganda techniques, at the heart of which was the notion that reality is understood in terms of both the present and the past. Reality is effectively redefined away from our own personal experience, our own cultural experience, our own national experience of reality, which tend to interrelate with one another. Reality is redefined away from those frames of reference and reconfigured around a totalitarian state. And so confessing 2 + 2 = 5, which was an obvious falsehood, it turned into a public declaration demonstration that one trusted the state's perception of reality more than one trusted one's own perception. So why do I bring that up, okay? All we have to do is think for a moment what our ruling class in general and our mainstream media elite in particular have become. All right, think about it. We have to understand that this is a media that applauds so-called transgender abortions. This is a media that consistently trumpets cultural Marxist ideology for every single area of life. Elizabeth Warren and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could spout off some of the most bizarre conceptions of reality imaginable, and such radical rhetoric isn't even remotely contested by the media, ever. Just go back to the way the media covered the Brett Kavanaugh Senate confirmation hearings. Do you remember that circus? There was no accusation of sexual misconduct, supposedly on his part, so insane, so over the top to be discounted. The mainstream media ate it up and spewed it out as if it were fact. The more salacious, the better. And then when one of the main actors of this theater of the absurd, Michael Avenatti, that creepy porn lawyer, when he was convicted in a court of law later on for extortion and sent to prison, that didn't matter. Our courts of law actually recognized him to be the sleazebag that everyone else seemed to recognize in the world. Everyone except CNN and MSNBC. They loved him. CNN had Avenatti as a guest on their various programs more than 6 times in a matter of literally days during that whole Stormy Daniels fiasco that was manufactured by the media. Even one anchor thought that he could have been the ideal candidate for the president for the Democratic Party. Truer words were never spoken. You see, our ruling class, at the heart of which is the mainstream Marxist media, they live in a parallel reality. But the problem isn't simply that they believe in that reality, that absurd fiction of cultural Marxist liberalism. That's not the problem. The problem is that our ruling class insists on imposing that reality on the rest of us, shoving it down our throats. And if we in turn even dare, if we have so much as the goal to even think of questioning them and their concocted version of reality, then we're subject at the very least to a verbal stoning, and at the worst, actual, social elimination. We're dismissed as deplorables, we're haters, we're racists, we're bigots, we're homophobes. We're laughed at by CNN panels, right, as dumb Southern rubes, knuckle-dragging Neanderthals, whose only reason on the planet for wanting to hold on to our customs, our cultures, and our traditions that we love and revere is because of our racist hatred of others. No, in short, our political class has politicized reality. Rather than seeing politics as a part of reality, they've actually interwoven the two, creating a single bizarre world that's far removed from the perceptions of reality for the vast majority of the population. That's why I don't think this latest lapse in basic mathematical abilities on the part of Brian Williams and that New York Times editor is simply an innocent oversight. They were so fixated on perpetuating a pro-Biden fraud in the American people that they ignored obvious reality. Their mathematical imbecility was nothing less than the embarrassing consequence of being so focused on peddling a biased narrative that they overlooked the details of that narrative in the process. All the parties involved, Brian Williams, the Washington Post writer who tweeted out the math blunder originally, that New York Times editor, they were all more interested in tarnishing Mike Bloomberg in order to champion Joe Biden, in accordance, of course, with the wishes of the DNC, than they were in checking out the factual details of what they were commenting on. You see, what they were claiming just sounded so good. The notion that Bloomberg could have given every American $1 million instead of wasting it all on this dithering campaign, that sounded so good. It made Bloomberg look small and Biden look big, which is all the media wanted to do at that point. It was a perfect soundbite for their own form of reality, and it happened to blow up in their faces. So, all of this is to say that this numerical imbecility on the part of these members of our ruling class is a perfect example of how the media is revealing to more and more people that they ought not to be trusted. I'm heartened to see that as a result of this flub, we're not just seeing more and more people laughing at the media's lack of basic mathematical competence. We're seeing more and more people laughing at their absurd version of reality. Now, before you go, the perfect complement to this video is my previous video that I just uploaded on the collapse of MSNBC. It's going to astound you just how bad they're falling apart, especially in light of this Brian Williams fiasco. But I think you're going to absolutely love it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.